Hello, my name is Davide Locatelli, and I will be presenting the paper Translate First, Reorder Later, a joint work with Francesco Cazzaro, Ariadna Quattoni, and Xavier Carreras from the UPC Barcelona. In our paper, we introduce a novel approach to semantic parsing. Before diving into the details, let's briefly introduce the setup. Semantic parsing is the task of mapping natural language sentences to meaning representations. These meaning representations can be logical expressions or SQL queries, and are executable programs that enable applications such as question answering, dialogue systems, or information retrieval. For instance, consider the following natural language sentence. What is the capital of Idaho? The corresponding meaning representation could be a functional program such as answer, capital, state, Idaho, which can then be executed to obtain the answer Boise. When building a machine learning-based dialogue system, it's crucial to have training data. If we limit the system to a specific domain like geography, we can begin with fundamental questions such as those about capital cities, the largest state, or a river. By adequately training the system, we can expect it to be able to handle such simple queries. However, humans are able to perform what's called compositional generalization, a remarkable ability to produce infinitely many new combinations of known components. For example, a user may ask about the capital of the biggest state or the largest state crossed by a river, combining the simpler parts we mentioned earlier. If these more complex questions are part of the training data, we can expect the system to handle them with ease. However, since the number of possible combinations is infinite, we cannot assume that our training data will cover all of them. Therefore, it's crucial that the system can robustly handle new combinations and generalize compositionally like humans. We can assess this ability by employing compositional splits, which entail presenting the system with novel combinations during testing. To effectively test different compositional phenomena, you'll need to split your data into train and test sets in a specific manner. Various methods have been suggested, including a query split where all examples sharing the same template are grouped together. For instance, if we anonymize the state names, answer size state California and answer size state Hawaii share the same template, and all such examples must be assigned to either the train or the test. This ensures that the test set contains novel queries that the system has to generalize to. Alternatively, you could use the length of the meaning representation to split the data, with the longest sequences designated as a test set. This approach requires the system to productively recombine functional symbols and generalize longer queries. Several recent studies have demonstrated that conventional sequence-to-sequence techniques fail to generalize in this manner. Although they perform exceptionally well on randomized test samples, recurrent and transformer-based models experience a significant decline in accuracy when subjected to compositional splits. The accompanying table displays the exact match accuracy ratings of standard sequence-to-sequence models on compositional benchmarks. Researchers have been actively striving to address this limitation by incorporating a compositional inductive bias into the training of these models to enhance their compositional generalization capabilities. A potential approach is to leverage word alignments. Word alignments refer to the correspondence between the words in an input sentence and those in an output sentence. In our domain, the input would be the natural language question and the output its meaning representation. Each natural language word is linked to a corresponding meaning representation word. Broadly speaking, we differentiate between two types of word alignments. Monotonic alignments arise when the words in the meaning representation maintain the same sequence as in the natural language question, so a lexical translation of the input gives the correct meaning representation. On the other hand, non-monotonic alignments entail the words in the meaning representation being arranged differently from those in the natural language. In such instances, the lexical translation of the input sentence must be reordered to yield the correct output. So, can we use the information contained in word alignments to improve compositional generalization? By harnessing the lexical correspondences, can we develop systems that prove robust to the complex phenomena of natural language? More specifically, if our system learns how to translate the basic components of the queries in a reliable manner, can it then be more adept at combining them in novel ways? We believe that the answer is yes. Our proposed solution entails a two-step process that leverages monotonic alignments. We refer to it as TPAL, which stands for Translate First, Reorder Later. The TPAL approach involves two distinct modules. Firstly, the lexical translator module generates a monotonic translation of the natural language query. Then, the reorder module is trained to reorder this monotonic translation to obtain the correct meaning representation. I will now leave the floor to my colleague Francesco, who will elaborate further on our proposed methodology.
Hi, I'm Francesco. So, the lexical translator produces in output symbols of the meaning representation. Given an input sentence, it predicts them in monotonic order by using the information from the word alignments. This means that if we have a sequence that is non-monotonic, we need to permute the symbols of the MRs such that they are correctly aligned with the input. Later, the reorderer will be in charge of restoring the correct order as depicted in the example. The reason why we use monotonic alignments is that it has been shown by my colleagues in a recent study that neural sequence-to-sequence parsers have better performances on monotonic sequences. So it seems that these models have an easier time modeling the more easier patterns with respect to the more complex ones. So our idea when designing our two-step approach is that we would like to exploit and induce this bias. One point that we want to stress about TPL is that it's model agnostic. So while we define what are the components and what is the input and the output, we do not put any constraint on the specific architecture itself. So in our experiments, we have tried a tagging approach with BERT, predicting an output symbol for each word in input, and also a sequence-to-sequence approach with a standard encoder-decoder predicting the whole MR. In the paper, you can find an architectural study in which we try to combine different models for the different components. However, what we want to emphasize is that you can try different models and more specialized architecture in place of translator and the reorder. So, our idea when designing TPL is that by decoupling translation and reordering, our model will still be valid and still retain its advantages even with different architecture. For the experimental part, we have used two datasets, SCAN and GeoQuery, which is the geo dataset augmented with alignment informations. This is a multilingual dataset. It comes in English, German and Italian, and it has 3 partitions, of which 2 are compositional, and it uses the FunQL formalism. What we compare TPL with is standard sequence-to-sequence approaches, in particular LSTM and DMBART, and also with other models in the literature that leverages word alignment information as well. So, in the presentation we will report results for the English language. Let's look at TPL with the gold aligned versus the standard sequence-to-sequence. If we look at the IID partition, we see that we have similar performance with the transformers architecture, but if we look at the compositional partition, we see that we do not suffer as big of a drop and we actually have very competitive performances. If we look at TPL with automatic alignments, here denoted by TPL Giza, because we use the Giza++ toolkit to generate these alignments, we see that we still have good performances on the IID partition, and also on the compositional partition we still do better than the MBAR transformers baseline. If we look now at TPL against other models in the literature, here all the models use automatic alignments. We see that still our performances are quite good and still very competitive in all the partitions. Next, we want to present a performance breakdown over monotonic and non-monotonic sequences. So let's look first at the IID partition. We compare here TPL with the MBART, so a transformer. Here the performances are very similar, but what changes is when we look at the compositional partition. Here clearly we have this peak on the red bar, which represents TPL over monotonic sequences, which is much better than mBART over monotonic sequences, the blue column. So this means that our idea of better modeling the monotonic sequences is working with this approach, and this is where our gains come from. At the same time, if we look at the non-monotonic performances, so the yellow and green bars, we see that we still maintain reasonable performance. So in conclusion, we have presented the TPOD, a two-step parsing approach that matches the performance of standard sequence-to-sequence or IID partitions, but it improves significantly over compositional partitions. We think that our gains comes from modeling better the monotonic patterns, and we can still be competitive even if we use not the gold alignments but automatically generated ones. For future work, we would like to investigate the use of more specialized architectures in the two components, and also of trying to extend this to more different mini representation formalisms and datasets. Thank you.